Hello and welcome along to the RTÉ Rugby podcast. A second helping this week because there's so much going on in Irish rugby at the moment. A reminder, if you haven't listened to it already, we did our Grand Slam recap podcast with Bernard Jackman and Ian Keatley yesterday. You can get all of that in the usual places. Now, though, we're turning our attention to the TikTok Women's Six Nations, which gets underway this weekend. As they did last year, Ireland open up the campaign against Wales. This time it's away from home. 2:15 kickoff at Cardiff Arms Park, live on RT2 and RT Player, as well as commentary on RTÉ Radio 1. Fiona Coghlan is with me to look ahead to all of that. Evening, Fiona. Thanks a million for speaking to us.
Evening. Delighted to be here.
I'm going to start actually, Fiona, by making you feel old. Obviously, 10 years since the Grand Slam win in Italy and all that. Does it feel like 10 years ago?
Well, I certainly do feel a lot older and look at, but no, it's flown by, to be honest with you. Yeah, like we have a WhatsApp group that just pings all the time and you're constantly in contact with the girls and management and stuff. But I feel it's flown by, even though there's so much that's gone on in women's rugby in those 10 years. Yeah, it just seems like yesterday. I remember it so vividly as well. But yeah, good old great days. And just, I kind of brought it all back to home then, because the men obviously did it 10 years later, the day after, so that brought it all home again. So it was brilliant.
Have you anything planned as a group, kind of mark the occasion or anything?
So we were trying, kind of unofficial last week, to try and get a group together, but everyone was all over the shop. So hopefully down for the Ireland-England game down in Cork, we might get a good crew down there.
Who's the social secretary of that group organising those things?
Yeah, I kind of put it in and kind of trying to organise it. But there was a little group that got a session going last weekend for the men's game to watch that, but it was only about 5 or 6 of them. So I'm taking it upon myself to try and get a bigger crew down in Cork.
So captaincy duties extends to 10 years down the line. You're not shirking that responsibility?
I just want a good night out, to be honest with you.
As you said, though, like there have been some great days since then. Unfortunately, probably more bad days than good days when it comes to Irish women's rugby, particularly in the last few years. But it does feel at the very least we're starting a new chapter now in the last few months. The first batch of domestic professionals getting ready for their first Six Nations campaign. Yeah,
look, there's been obviously a distinct change since the review came out. The IRFU took upon the recommendations all on board. Greg McWilliams is obviously in as coach. This is his second season, but even that summer tour away to Japan, like the first time there was a summer tour, gave a lot of young players lots of opportunities as well. Then to go into professional contracts, and I know like it wasn't a full take up, but I think that's pretty understandable when something new like that comes in and people have to rearrange their life. And I know it was muted and stuff like that it was going to be coming up, but still there are big changes that you have to ask people to take. So I think as that kind of progresses, we'll see more and more players kind of take it up, and hopefully some of those English players will come back and take up national contracts, because to be fair, they're more lucrative than they'd be getting over in England anyway. And then great that they were in training as professionals since November. And then obviously there was the the Celtic Challenge, which was another, to be honest with you, I didn't think the standard of it was hugely great, but it gave those young players another opportunity to go abroad, play abroad, be in that team environment. They'll learn a huge amount from that, and also put some players in the shop window for national coaches to have a look at them a little bit deeper. So while the standard wasn't great, there was positives to take out of it.
Before we get into the weeds of how Ireland are going to do and the fixtures and the format, it's the second year of this new standalone time slot. Obviously running straight after the Six Nations. Like it is still competing, it has to be said, with latter stages of Champions Cup, big rounds in the URC. So like it isn't just out on its own where there isn't any competition. It does have to kind of fight for the eyes.
Yeah, look, I think no matter what time of the year in the rugby calendar you have it, there's always going to be competition. So I think it's nice that it runs immediately straight after, I suppose, the men's and the 20s, that were straight into it, that international kind of, you have an appetite for international rugby, that's still there. The fact that it's been broadcast free to air is absolutely brilliant to get more eyes on it as well. And that's been consistent now that people know that if they want to watch the women's game, that it's live on national TV, which is huge. I think the move to Musgrave Park was positive, and I think hopefully that crowd come out again that we saw there last weekend, all 8,000 of them come out again to support the women. But you're right, there is that competition still there, and that's why the product as the game needs to keep improving, to keep the eyeballs on it and keep generating people's attention on it. And then that's that full circle of getting bums on seats and sponsors in and more people playing. And, but I think that move was certainly really, really positive, because it was just so busy on an international weekend to try and keep up with everything. So hopefully, I think it will stay in this window regardless as we go on with the WXB and things like that. But it's been a really positive move.
The move to Cork, you said it there as well. That's one I quite like as well. I did two of the three home games last year. I did the RDS game against Wales, and I did Italy in Cork. And I have to say, I thought like the whole experience down in Cork, it just felt a lot better. The RDS was probably a little bit too big, and down in Cork, they were able to get the right amount of people into it and generate a really, really good atmosphere. And it felt like a full ground, and that obviously extended to the atmosphere all around it. And speaking to people who would have done a lot of the 20s games as well down there, when you have a nice little 8,000 ground and you can fill it up well, you can make a lot of noise in there and really kind of generate a good atmosphere and make it a good home as well.
Yeah, and that's what I'd say the players want a home. Like for us, our home was Ashbourne, and we did love it. We absolutely loved it out there, and the crowd, we knew them, they were local. We knew who was going to be there every week, and like Energy Park was probably a little bit too small, and as you said, the RDS was too big. Like you're lost unless the crowd are on top of you. So I thought it was really positive in there, and I know like for the Cork public, they're starved of a little bit of rugby. Obviously they had the South Africa A game down there, and they've had a couple of games for Munster and Musgrave Park and stuff, but like they really bought into that 20s tournament this year. Look, it helps when they're winning, and it helps when they bring a Grand Slam home in Cork. But I just hope that the public continue to buy into it and come out in droves. It's 2 games down there, and 2, big games with 2 of the best teams in the world coming up on show. So it'll be good.
And it'll be interesting to see, can they, obviously the expectations are very, very different for the women's team than they were for Andy Farrell's side and for the 20s as well. But it will be interesting to see, can they just feed off that appetite, as you said, for international rugby and that energy. Like I've been out in Abbottstown at the High Performance Centre the last couple of days for the media activity, and the players have spoken about the fact that when they've been in over the last couple of weeks, there has been a buzz, there has been an energy. I can't remember, it was Molly Scuffle McCabe, I think, yesterday, or it might have been Niamh Briggs actually talking about the fact that they were able to kind of get a bit of advice, kicking advice, things like that off Johnny Sexton, and picking the brains of a couple of players. And it will be interesting to see, does that energy just kind of feed off and carry on with the players as much as the public.
Yeah, like I think all of them been out there in the HPC or HPU? HPC out in Blanche.
HPC is Munster. It might be something different.
Oh, HPU, it's the High Performance Unit.
That's it, yeah.
In Blanche, like, just having all that expertise out there on every front, and we look at even the women's backroom team has grown in terms of analysis, nutritionists and things like that. I think this women's squad, obviously you go into a tournament wanting to win every game, but I think they'll be very realistic where they're at in terms of what they need to achieve this season. Obviously, again, more new faces in, but they have a little bit of a core stable group, and obviously in terms of Greg and stuff, they've stable coaches. Briggsy's been there, John has been there, and Foggs was obviously away on tour with them in Japan. So there is consistency in their coaches as well, but I think they'll be very realistic of where they're at, and they will be focusing on like those away games in particular and looking to get wins there. But they want to put on a show at home as well.
On the overall tournament look ahead, is it very much looking like a straight shootout between England and France, 1 and 2, and a fight, albeit probably an entertaining fight enough between the rest of them to get third?
Yeah, like England seem like the fact that their coaches are staying this year as well is big for them, and I think they're looking for kind of some retribution from the World Cup as well. But they haven't had a huge amount of change in their squad. There's a few new faces, and Sarah Hunter's obviously retiring after the first weekend on 141 international caps, which is just phenomenal. So they have that consistency in the performance, but they're missing their 10. Zoe Harrison is out injured, so Holly Aitchison's going to be in there, and that's kind of pressure on her. And Emily Scarrett, who would run the back line, really is out injured as well. But I just think they have too much strength and depth within their squad. France, a little bit different. New coaches in, David Ortiz and Gail Mignot, one of my friendly foes from many years ago, former French captain. She's in as coach as well, and they've had a good few retirements. And France over the years have been so fickle in their performances. Like sometimes on away trips, if it's raining, they just don't like to play, and you never know what you get. But in terms of the quality of players they have, the experience of players they have, they look certainly set to be a step ahead of the others. And yeah, then I think any of the other four could beat each other on their day. Italy, new coach in, not a huge amount of retirements. I think it was only 2 retirements in Furlan and Petoni. Wales coach, Scottish coach, same coaching team. And again, they've a lot of consistency in their squad as well. And, you know, they obviously had a big time together at the World Cup. Like they had 2 months together at the World Cup. All of the teams are pro now in some manner or form. And so, you know, that kind of levels that side of it up as well. So it's just going to see who maximize their performance. I think this first game against Wales is huge. They only have 2 home games this year, and Ireland is one of them and England is the other one. So like gung-ho, they're going to be coming out after that Irish performance.
And I know, you know, if there's a relatively passive rugby fan listening and they're talking to us or listening to us talk about Ireland going for third, it might sound a little bit deflating, but there's a decent prize for getting top 3 this year when you factor in the WXV tournament coming later on in 2023. And given the fact as well is that there's no promotion or relegation in the first year of that. So a third place finish for Ireland is guaranteeing them games for 2 seasons against top quality opposition, which will be invaluable for them going forward.
And that's the thing, there will be WXV for all the tiers. There'll be qualification. There's tier 1.
But the top tier, you know.
Yeah, the top tier. And that's hugely important for World Cup qualification because they're going to be using that going towards the next World Cup and World Cup qualification. But as you said, it's having that top tier of rugby every year. And that just drives the standards even further again. So like that's huge for them. And I've been saying this since I heard this WXV tournament was coming out. I was like, Ireland have to get in that top tier. Like it's just imperative in order to just keep driving standards, getting more into the game and everything around it. So it's hugely important. And like, they'll know that as well. And that'll be their target. Will be third.
So this is the point where we go about talking about how they go about doing it. As we've said, it's a very young, very inexperienced squad. Like there are a few players in there dotted with a good bit of experience, but like Niamh Briggs, we were speaking to yesterday, and to quote her, she said, "I'm not going to say we're still in transition. We're not. I think we have to get out of that mindset now." Considering it's a very inexperienced squad, it's an ambitious thing to say, and it's good to see the coach kind of, you know, they have had 12 months where they've been getting to know each other as a coaching team, getting to know the players. They've gone to Japan, and now they're coming into a Six Nations, and you can't keep falling back onto that in transition kind of mentality for too long. And it seems they do know that themselves.
Yeah, look, I think we've been talking about the women's squad in transition for God knows how many years now, whether that's players, coaches, or whatever. I think every season we talk about it transitioning. So yeah, I think she's dead right to put a stop on that and say, right, they've had this structure in place. They've got that. I think the tour to Japan was huge in terms of betting in some of those younger players about what's expected of them. And then the professionalism as well. This is their job for a number of them now, and the performance at the end of the day is what's important. So they're professional rugby players. It's all about performance and results at the end of the day. That's what they're going to be measured on. And while that's tough for some of them are only 19, but you know, they would have known that buying into it, and it would have been very much, while there's the holistic development of the player and ensuring that they're going through their education process as well, they are paid to play rugby, so they have to perform, and there will be an expectation on them to perform. And some of them will rise to it, and some of them will struggle, and that's what you're going to find out about the players now.
Exactly, and the flip side as well is we've been saying for a few months now. Okay, this group of Irish women's players, a lot of them are full-time professional athletes. They've been training consistently together for several months now. We're going to see improvements naturally. On the other side, Wales, as an example, this weekend, they came to Dublin last year in the early stages of professionalism. They're 12 months further down the line as well. So again, we're likely to see them being a little bit better than they were last year.
Yeah, to be honest with you, last year I didn't think their couple of months professionalism, I didn't really see it in the game. I thought they were probably had a bit more nous about them and a bit more experience, and they
a lot more physical. That was probably the extent of it, I think.
Yeah, and they went to their strength, which was their line-out maul, and Ireland just couldn't defend it. So I don't know how much the professionalism had really come through there, but I do think we're going to see a distinct improvement. Well, I hope we should expect it. If not, someone should be asking questions about what they've been doing. But yeah, it was interesting for that Celtic Challenge. Ireland actually won the 2 games against the Welsh development side. So combined provinces. The first game was close. It was 27-26. The second game was 19-0. But they were a Welsh squad without any of their players playing in the Premiership, which similarly we were playing without any of our players in the Premiership. So it'll be interesting to see the depth and the numbers that come back into the matchday 23 and what they'll bring. Obviously, a lot of Gloucester Hartpury players are playing on the Welsh national team, and likewise we've Niamh Jones and Sam Monaghan, who I've no doubt will be involved in matchday 23. So it depends on what experience they bring as well. But I would expect to see definitely a higher fitness level in terms of physicality, improved skill level. Like obviously we're young, I would imagine young 10, I would imagine Dan O'Brien will stay at 10 because they have to stick with someone at this stage because there's been too much chopping and changing over the last number of years, and she was there for the Japan tour and for the Brian provinces, so give her more time. Like you could see in the Interpros, her game management needed to improve. I thought Nicole Cronin, who played for Munster, her game management was actually better, even though Dana probably has more natural kick and things. There's I suppose there's pros and cons to both type of players, but she is still only 19. She had played very little senior rugby. I think she probably played one game senior for Solo before she stepped into an Irish touring squad. So
and looked very comfortable in Japan.
Yeah, she did. Her skill set seems to be there. She's playing the whole way up. I think it's just now her game management and putting her in those pressurized situations and learning from it, and she will learn and she'll make mistakes, and that's fine, but you need to be put in those pressurized situations, and you don't get it at training. It's at this high level in matches that you get it.
Any other individuals you've kind of seen or heard of through the Celtic Challenge, or people we mightn't necessarily know too much about that you'd be looking forward to seeing a little bit of in the Six Nations, or you think could make a decent impact?
I think Dervnik Verd, she's capped for 4 times now, but like she started, I remember playing as a winger, then she went to the sevens, she came back, she got capped at front row, then as hooker, but she was standout in the back row for Munster. In the Interpros, I think she was player of the tournament. She was absolutely outstanding, but then they were throwing her in a bit in the combined provinces into hooker again. But then you'd need Jones and hookers. But I think Dervnik has to be on the pitch. I think
and she was playing back row as well in the combined.
Yeah. So I was half, and then she went in as hooker for some of it. So
he's putting Josh van der Fleer and Cian Healy to shame.
Yeah, she was unreal. So that's going to be a really interesting dynamic because there is a great depth in the Irish back row, to be fair. Obviously Mavo, Hannah O'Connor, Dorothy Wall. I saw Idel McNamara was actually out. McMahon's out. She got injured. So Dur for me is one who's been standing out this whole season. 4 caps, she should add more to her name. I'd be shocked. She definitely has to be on the 23. I think she should be starting. And 13, young Aoife Dalton. She's like a young Lynn Cantwell the way she plays. Again, she's only 19. She come up through the ranks, Leinster under 8, Tullamore, Leinster under 18s, and just seems to have a really wise head on very young shoulders. But just even the way she plays was like a young Lynn Cantwell. So hopefully she can follow in that trajectory. Again, she was starting 13 in Japan and the combined province, so I've no doubt she'll be starting. And then one of the uncapped players who I'd imagine get game time would be Niamh O'Dowd, prop. Belvedere prop played with Leinster this season. So the prop situation would be an area of concern with regards to experience. Obviously, Linda Jujang is there. She was loose head for a lot of last season, but it looks like she might be moving to tight head with Christy Haney at loose head, and then it's pretty much uncapped the rest of them. So I think Niamh O'Dowd could make an impact there. I could definitely see her on the 23 and getting game time. She should get capped.
And one of the other interesting things we heard this week, Niamh Briggs was saying that the dual players, the 7s and 15s players, aren't going to be coming back in later in the championship. They'll be concentrating on the 7s program while they're trying to get their Olympic qualification spot in the final round in Toulouse. I mean, on one hand, it obviously is a blow that there are a lot of outstanding players that can't come in. Is there another side of it, though, where it's a big vote of confidence and it's putting probably a good level of expectation on some players that there isn't this magic group of players that can come in and save the day later on in the tournament if things aren't going too well?
Like, regardless of anything, I think this is the right decision. So I don't think last year I thought it was desperate that they were in for 2 games taken away and then other people were put in for 3 games. I just don't think that's the right way to develop a squad. Like, if you look at Andy Farrell, he had a squad, he had everyone involved at training sessions, he brought everyone from Portugal to Cardiff. That was their squad. They knew each other on the pitch, they knew each other off the pitch. So I thought bringing players in for 2 games and then other players who hadn't been in brought back in for the rest of the games. I thought that was wrong. Obviously, they're very talented players. You have the likes of Amy Lee Murphy-Crowe, Bevan Parsons, Eve Higgins, Lucy Mulhall, Stacey Flood, and the rest who we haven't even seen yet are talented players. Priority for them is obviously Olympic qualification. At the moment, they're sitting in the right position. They're sitting fifth, but if it stays as it is, France are in front of them, so they're automatic because they're hosts. So Ireland goes, so they have to stay there. So that is priority, and I totally understand that. But even if that wasn't the case, I don't think there should be movement to players like that. I just don't think it does anything for a squad and learn to develop a squad and to know each other. So I think that was the right decision.
Yeah, it just feels like if there are a couple of bad results in the first couple of rounds, and if hypothetically those players were brought back in, it could be fairly damaging to the confidence of a young player that, you've had a couple of tough caps and all of a sudden these more important players are brought back in and it feels like you're done almost.
And look, those players haven't played any 15s rugby this calendar year anyway. Did they play a few club games maybe previously before December, but they haven't played any 15s rugby, so they're not 15s ready. So I don't think it would be even beneficial to the squad, no matter how good they are, because they haven't played any 15s rugby.
One final bit before I get some predictions out of you. Someone whose name has cropped up a couple of times in the interviews we've done this week, John McKee. It seems Niamh Briggs and the players are absolutely enamored with him. He went on the tour of Japan with the squad, and he's been brought in permanently as a senior coach working alongside Greg McWilliams. The vibe we're getting from what we heard off people is Greg is very much the good cop, and John not so much bad cop, but the more serious cop, the more detail oriented cop. But it seems they've got a good kind of a good bit of a tag team thing going on there, and the players certainly love him, and he brings a vast amount of experience to the group.
Yeah, I think his original role to come in was to sit over and kind of overview it. But then when they went on tour to Japan, he was very hands-on, particularly with the forwards. And it just went down so well. I think they were hugely impressed with him, as you said. And you need that good bad cop, don't you? I think it was very similar with Greg and Goose back in the day. Goose was definitely the bad cop and Greg was the good cop. And, players want that. They want that attention to detail. They want to be challenged to make them better players as well. And as you said, that huge experience from coaching national team with Fiji and, even his own experience as a player and, being in those environments as a player, he'll add to that. Now, I know it was time ago that he was a player, but he'll still understand what they're going through at international level. So that's been a brilliant appointment from the IRFU's point of view. And it's great for Greg as well to have someone with that experience, because obviously it's his first role as a head coach of a national team. And, even to have someone to bounce ideas off, but it's having the balance right amongst the management group, which appears to be the case. I know there's a new manager in as well, in Alana Gattinger, I think her name is, Canadian girl. So, I think that whole management dynamic, and the bagman Andy Weir is still there. He was back there in my day as well, and he's a great guy. And those roles sometimes go understated of what he does and what someone like that brings to the squad. I know for years we heard about Rala and them de-stressing by going to Rala's room, eating jellies and wrapping them up. But, those kind of conversations that someone will have, whether it's with a physio or bagman, bagwoman, whatever, they're really, really important. But John's appointment was very shrewd and strategic, I would imagine, by the IRFU as well. And it was great that he accepted and took it on. So he must be getting something from it as well, because with a coach with so much experience, that he's happy, to go in with this squad who are so young and so inexperienced, but the difference that I'm sure he sees the difference that he can make in a short time, which he did in Japan, what he can now do, and he has them for so much longer.
Well, it'll be fascinating to see the impact he's had on the side. As I said, 2:15 p.m. kickoff at Cardiff Arms Park this Saturday, live on RTÉ2 and RTÉ Player, Wales against Ireland. Also live commentary on RTÉ Radio 1 as well. Fiona, before we leave you go, I want your Six Nations winner. I want your final position for Ireland, and I want your winner for this weekend in Cardiff.
England are going to win it in a sellout crowd in Twickenham. That's over 40,000 at the moment. Ireland, I so want them to finish third. I just think it's probably too big an ask to go on the road and win those 3 games. I'm going to say fourth. I'm going to say they're going to have 2 wins.
And that's yeah, that's the thing, as I said, the away games, it's, there isn't a huge amount between Ireland, Italy, Scotland, and Wales. But ultimately, if Ireland are to finish third, they're winning 3 away games.
Yeah. So like that's huge. I want to be wrong. I want them to prove me wrong. I want them to be third, but I think it's going to be fourth. And this weekend it's going to be very close. It's going to be 1-score game. I'm going to go with Ireland. 1 score. Don't know what score is, but 1-score game.
Well, fingers crossed you're right. Fiona Coghlan, thanks a million for joining us. Enjoy Cardiff this weekend.
Cheers. Thanks.